While we have had so much on our minds this year, we do have to start thinking about our tax return, and there are some things left that you can do to help mitigate your taxes before the end of the year. Lisa Green Lewis, CPA and TurboTax expert, gave us 3 things to think about. First, Lisa, is to estimate your taxes early. What do you mean by that?
Get a picture of your overall tax situation as early as you can. So start gathering any documents worth deductible expenses. Know what your income is that you made this year, whether you're self-employed, an employee, or had investments. One of the ways that you could do that, we have our TurboTax Taxcaster that helps you estimate your overall tax picture. It gives you a really good estimate of whether you may get a refund or may possibly have to pay some taxes. And then it can also, there's some tricks there that you can do before the end of the year.
Right, because a lot of people might be thrown off guard a little bit, especially if they received unemployment checks and they didn't have withholding. So we don't want people to be taken by surprise come April. The other thing that you said is to take advantage of all the deductions. And I know there's so many deductions that people often miss. Maybe we could talk about some of them.
Right. Yes, there are so many deductions that people miss. We talked a little bit before about donating to charity. So a lot of people miss if you've driven to volunteer time, the mileage you drive, you may be able to deduct that at 14 cents per mile. A lot of people forget about their sales tax deduction. You have to pick between state and sales tax deductions, but if you've made big purchases and you live somewhere where the state sales tax is high, you may see a bigger deduction just by taking that. Don't forget one of the tricks, if you made investments, and you've had some losing stock, offset your losses with your gains. And then you can also carry forward your gains to your ordinary income up to $3,000.
Right. And that's a really important point. And that was your third one, to say play matchmaker with your capital gains and losses. And people need to start to really think about that if you haven't already, because we're coming to the end of the year and the market is closed on a couple of days because of holidays. So pay attention, call your advisor, your trader, whoever you deal with, and start to get on that. But same goes for like reinvested dividends, right? We all reinvest our dividends and we forget that we should go back and do something with these things, right?
Right. Yes. If you have reinvested dividends, don't forget, you need to include those in your costs. Including them in your costs will lower the gain that you see.
Right. And so many people forget to do that. Then you also talked about student loan interest, of course, the child dependent care credit, but points paid to refinance. I think that's a missed one too, isn't it?
That is often a missed one. So you do get a deduction for points you pay. If you refinance your loan, the points are divided over the years of your loan, but it still can be, a big deduction. And then a lot of people, they may have a refinance that have points they have not deducted, and then they go and they refinance again. And so they need to know that those points that are left over on the other loan, you can deduct those once that you refinance for another loan.
Right. Right. Again, like it's just a matter of keeping track of all this stuff. You also mentioned too, if you are one of the lucky ones that are up and going to get a bonus at year end, maybe depending on your situation, you want to defer it to 2021, right?
Yes, you could defer your bonus. A lot of people get year-end bonuses. So asking your employer to defer it to the first week of January, you're just missing it for 1 week, but you're moving that income into the following year and, lowering your taxable income this year. And it's especially good to look at that if you think it's going to bump you up into another higher tax bracket this year.
Right, and vice versa too, right? If you happen to, unfortunately be laid off, or you were unemployed for a bit and you made less money, maybe take it this year. Same with accelerating deductions and defer and things like that too, right? It really makes sense for people to look at their situation.
Right. Yes, you can look at, what your tax bracket is this year or next year, and depending on what it is, you can make those moves depending on whether it's going to be higher or lower in this year.
And many people were out looking for jobs. So job hunting costs too. Don't forget those, especially in particular, if you're job hunting in the same field. Those are all important expenses.
Yeah, one thing to point out on that. So under tax reform, job hunting expenses are no longer deductible, unfortunately.
I wanted to bring that up because I think that's important that people keep track of this stuff, but know that they can't put it on. I'm glad we talked about that. You said state income tax paid on last year's return. Don't forget that as well. And finally, taking a class. How does that help me, other than making me more enlightened?
Yeah, so you can pay for a class for next quarter, either for yourself or if you have a college student. As long as you pay for it by December 31st for the first quarter of next year, you may be able to take the American Opportunity Credit if you're in the first 4 years of college or your student is, or the Lifetime Learning Credit up to $2,000. And that can be just for one class. There's no stipulation that it's for the first 4 years of college.
So it's really important that people take a step back, spend a little time. I know it's the last thing you want to do, but it's if you get a sense of where you are, you can make some smart decisions. Lisa Greene Lewis, CPA, TurboTax expert, thank you for sharing all this. And of course, everyone should check out the site, the Taxcaster. It'll certainly help your situation.